Hello class, I wanted to provide a brief lecture on MLA style. I'm going to try to keep this brief. It tends to be a little bit complex, as I'm sure you've all seen, but I wanted to go over some of this. Now, before I get started, I will say that the style sheet that I'm using, and we'll go over what a style sheet is. The style sheet that I'm using is the older form of MLA. There has been an update that came out last year, but in an effort to kind of keep it consistent with what you guys are used to and not introduce all the newfangled things that MLA did in their most recent update, I'm going to keep with this old format. If you've learned the new style, feel free to go with it. If you don't know what to do with MLA, maybe lean towards this and use this to help you out. The other thing I wanted to say is that if you choose to use another format, another style sheet rather, Chicago, APA, something that you're familiar with, you're more than welcome to. You just need to keep it consistent. All right. So, sorry about that. So, a style sheet. What is a style sheet? Well, MLA is a style sheet. MLA, for those that don't know, stands for Modern Language Association. And a style sheet for the Modern Language Association is a way to kind of keep things consistent among a group of people. So a company will have its own style sheet, usually modeled off of something else. An academic group will have its own style sheet. That's what Modern Language Association is. It's an association of English departments as well as French and Spanish and language departments. You also have APA, which is American Psychiatrists. It might be Psychologists Association, but they tend to work with all the social sciences. You also have style sheets for different hard sciences, for those of you that are in biology or something like that. You have a certain way of doing things. The reason that style sheets are important, the reason you want to make sure that you know how to use them, is because it allows your reader to find information quickly. So they can find your sources quickly. If they, not so that they can double check whether or not you're telling the truth, but so that they can find something they find that they think is interesting. So if I'm reading your paper and you cite a source that I want to know more about, you want me to be able to find it. That's the idea of citing that source, to give authority to your writing, but also to allow a further exploration of the topic if the reader chooses. So that's what style sheets are there for as far as citations. But you also have style sheets that come in and decide how we're going to put information on the actual page. So, for instance, in MLA, you have formatting. That's very specific to MLA. It needs to follow these rules, and we'll talk about. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact, but the idea here is that you make it consistent so that what people are focusing on are your ideas instead of looking at your Comic Sans font or whatever and trying to make sense of what you're writing. So you want to make sure things are consistent so they know where to look for information and so that they know how to find the information they're looking for. All right. So you have MLA. This is their formatting style. This is the recommendation for student papers for formatting them. All right. So you have 1-inch margins on all sides. Okay. That's just a way to frame the text so that there's no like overflow and it doesn't screw up on the printer and that sort of thing. All right. You have Times New Roman 12-point font. Okay. You have Times New Roman because it's a serifed font. Okay. So serifed is the little things on the end. So see down here on the H, there are little lines. Those are what are called serifs. Serif fonts are easier to read when it's small type. Sans serif, like Helvetica and other things like that, those are easy to read in larger format. Okay, so you want it to be a serif font to make sure that it's clear with the difference between an L and an I and a 1 and that sort of thing. So that's why this is called for. You have double spaced. Why? So that it's easy to read. This is not so there's space in between so the teacher can write comments. It's so that it's easy for the reader to look through your paper and read it, okay, quickly. All right. The commenting is also a factor, but by making it sure to be double spaced, then you ensure that it's easier for the reader to make their way through it. 5-inch indentation. That's just, or 5-inch, half-inch indentation. That's just a way to say that you tab one in. Okay. If you are writing for business writing, for instance, like a business letter, then you usually don't do this. This is not standard format. This is not the style sheet for a business letter. The business letter uses what's called block formatting, where there is no indentation, but there is more of a space between paragraphs. Okay. You also have a standard heading, meaning what goes in the top box above all your writing. That includes your name, and when we're writing for an academic audience, the professor's name, the course number, and the date. Okay. You don't necessarily. Well, I'm sorry. The standard heading. This is not the head. This is not what goes in the box. I screwed up what a lot of people screw. A lot of my students also get confused with. A heading is what comes on the first page, and this is what you put on the first page, and we'll look at that in a second. A header, not a heading. A header is what goes in that box above all your typing. Okay. And that's where you have the name and page number on the right-hand side. Okay. Why do you do that? Because if for some, and this goes back to when people printed everything off instead of reading it on their computer. If someone dropped their paper, then they could find the page they were looking at before, even if it all scattered on the floor. That's the idea behind this. Also, if you're looking at a stack of papers, you want to make sure that all your stuff sticks together, and this is one way to do that because it's your name on the top of it. All right. This is standard format now. It's not as necessary now that most things are turned in electronically. So you can see here, you have the heading, all right, so name, professor, course title or whatever, and then date. And this is European style dating, but you can do American style. European meaning the number comes, the day comes first and then the month. But, you know, it's fine to do it the other way around. So you have, it's an 8.5 by 11 page, okay? You have an inch margin around everything except for the header, which that's the little box above, and it has the page and the name, and then you have your indentation. Okay, this is what's called a block quote. I'm not going to go too much into that today, but if you want to know more about block quotes, I'm happy to talk about it. The rule of thumb with a block quote is if your typed quotation from a source exceeds at least 3 lines, then you turn it into a block quote. But, and I'll say this, strongly recommend, you guys are not writing papers that are long enough to need a lot of block quotes, maybe 1 or 2. But you usually want to talk about, and we're not getting into this today, but you want to talk about a source that you cite at least 3 times as long as the citation itself. So if you have a block quote that goes on for 4 lines, then you want to talk about it for, 12 lines. So that's a little bit more in-depth analysis than a lot of you guys are being asked to do. So don't worry about block quotes. Try to kind of narrow in. All right. When you're writing with MLA style, you use intertextual visual aids, okay, which you're asked to do in your paper. You want to use, you want to label them sequentially, table 1, table 2 if it's a table, figure 1, figure 2 if it's a picture. Okay, they must include a caption. It doesn't have to be a fancy caption with a nice name. It's just figure 1, what is it? That way, if the caption gets lost, then you can find where it goes. And if the picture is not very clear, they can look at the title, what you've called it, and they can see. Okay. And if you talk about them, you need to include an in-text citation if they're not your own. Okay. Just what it goes with. You want to make sure that you credit where this information comes from, even if it's just a picture. And that's why I'm asking for you to label any original stuff, okay, so that other people can cite it. But also, if you use somebody else's stuff, make sure that you put an in-text citation in there. All right. And we'll talk about what an in-text versus works cited citation is. Okay. So figures can include all photographs, graphs, and other visual aids, not just drawings and that sort of thing. So here's an example. We have a picture, okay? Figure 2. Why is this figure 2? Because this is figure 1. And this is not a very good example of MLA because I don't have a caption here, but I do have a in-text citation, MLA 116. All right. And then here I have Donner, number 1. So it's from the first page of a student essay. So you have standing out from the crowd as the title that she gave the picture, and you have this picture, right? And that's basically what you do. I will recommend that you save the captions for the end, because if you move your picture around because you're double spaced or whatever, then the captions don't usually move with it, at least not in MS Word. Okay, so you may want to wait until the end just to make things easier. But make sure that you do it, because that's the style sheet. You also, when you're referring to text, okay, this is something that I assume you know, but just in case, longer works, italicize them. If it took more than a day to put together, or more than a day to read or experience, then you want to make it italicize it. So TV shows are italicized. If it's a short text, then you put it in quotation marks. So a TV episode is a quotation mark. A song is in quotation marks. An album is italicized. Okay? And that's basically what it comes down to. An essay, it's shorter, so it's usually put in quotation marks. A book, that's italicized. All right, so just make sure that you're doing that while you're writing. That's MLA style as well, because remember, we want to make sure that our reader can find the information and can use what we're giving them effectively. Well, if you start italicizing short text and putting quotation marks around longer text, then your reader is going to be confused because you're not following MLA style. So I'm going to skip over this, but you can look at this again and if you want to talk about block quotes. Don't worry about this. So MLA style, all this will be online. I'll put this on our Canvas site so you can look at these slides a little more closely. And I apologize for the slant. I like the way this looks, but I know it can be confusing for some people, especially if you have a little bit of vertigo. So now we're going to talk about the citation. So you have the formatting that makes it easy for your reader to understand what you're saying with your big ideas and to find information as they need. So who wrote this and that sort of stuff. The citation is the most important part of style sheets, because that's where you really get into the nitty-gritty. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail here. I'm going to give you a lot of examples. And again, you can find this on the PowerPoint if you choose. Citations, you want to follow this format as best as you can. If it's a little bit screwy, that's fine. But you want to follow this because this is the way that it makes it easy for your reader to find this information, to find your source, to find what they're looking for if they decide to look for it, both in text, so as they're reading your essay, and at the end. Okay, so in MLA style, so in APA and Chicago, these are two different style sheets. APA and Chicago, you do not have, I'm sorry, I just remember. In Chicago, you do not have a separate, or the in-text citation is very different is very similar to the works cited. I'm sorry, it's very similar to works cited. It looks a lot like it. If you know anything about Chicago, you know this. But it has a footnote, okay? The reason they do that is because Chicago is mainly used by historians, and historians will cite a lot of things. So they try to put it at the bottom of the page so it doesn't distract from what the historian is trying to say. APA, the in-text citation uses years. Why? Because APA is a scientific style sheet, and in science, the currency, or how recent the research was done, is very important. In the humanities and language studies, then like English classes, then the currency is not as important as who said it. That's what's important, because if Aristotle said something in whatever BC and Shakespeare responded in 1600 AD, then you have, it doesn't matter because they're talking to each other, and so what's important is the person that does it. So you have these in-text citations that mention the author. The point of the in-text citation is to draw your attention to the end where all this information is gathered. And that's what's called the works cited page. Okay? Technically, if you're writing, you can have a works cited page and a works referenced page. Okay, so you can have both. A works cited is something that you talk about in your text. Whether you paraphrase it, summarize it, or quote it, you still will put that in the works cited. Works reference is something that I may have read that helped me come up with my ideas, but I didn't actually cite them. Okay. In other style sheets, these are called references, and they usually put those two together. But you have your works cited page. So it's works or texts that are actually cited in the body of the essay. The works cited page, okay, it does list the sources that you cite, but it also is a reference for your reader to find additional information about the stuff that you cover in your paper. This bibliography, works cited, if you're doing research into a topic and you find an essay that you like, look at the works cited page, because they do, or their bibliography, because they will often have information that is very useful if you're interested in that topic. And that's what you're trying to do for other readers. All right? So this can seem difficult, but I'm going to try to simplify the citation style for you. All right? So the basics. Here's what's going on with the works cited page. All references need to be listed alphabetically, not in the order that they're cited, alphabetically. Okay? If you have multiple works by the same author, they need to be alphabetic. So if I have two guys from John Smith, then John Smith, title starts with B, comes before John Smith, title starts with V. Okay? You want a hanging indent, and that's just a hanging indent means that instead of the half inch coming at the beginning of the line, the first line, it comes in every line after. And what you can do to set this is to go into the paragraph on your works, on your word processing, MS Word, Pages, or whatever. Go into the paragraphing, and there's usually a special indentation called a hanging indent. If you don't know what that is, then just right-click on the paragraph and go down to you can find it. If not, please email me. I'm happy to help out. Okay, but because you're using a hanging indent, no numbers, no bullet points, just the hanging indent. Okay. So the goal is, like I said, the point of the in-text citation is to reference the author, and then what the in-text citation, and we'll get to that in a second, we'll look at is the point of that is to direct the reader to the works cited page. So if I'm reading an essay and I see Smith, John, page 15, then what I'm getting from that is that if I want to know more about this, then I'm going to go to the works cited and see what they have, where that citation is, so I can get the full information to find that book, that article, that whatever. Okay, so that's why we do a hanging indent, because you can see here, this makes it very easy for me to find the author name, the last name of the author. Okay, because I'm looking, as you can see here, and all I see are names, 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 names. So it's easy to scan through and find what I'm looking for. All right. So the format for a citation, this goes for everything in MLA. You want the last name of the author, the first name. Okay, comma, last name, comma, first name. And then if you have multiple authors, then you put a comma, and then it's first name, last name, like just the name, 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 name. But overall, last name, first name, then the article name, if you have an article name. All right. Quotation marks because it's a short piece. If it's a chapter in a book, then that's the same thing. Okay. Period. Book title. Okay. So this is the article. This is the book. Where can I find this article? Well, I can find it in this book. Publication information. So year, or where it was published, who published it, where, what year. Okay. Page numbers. All right. So this article in this book, where in this book, these pages. Because remember, we're trying to make it easy for the reader to find this information. And medium. Medium just means what kind of resource was it? Was it a video clip? Okay. Was it a print? Was it a book? Was it electronic? Okay. What kind of file was it? Was it a PDF? All right. That sort of thing. Okay. This is very simple, and not everything's going to have this. So if I get a journal article, for instance, then I don't have a book title. But what do I have? I have publication information that includes the journal itself. Okay. If I'm citing something from the New York Times, okay, New York Times is not a book. New York Times is a newspaper, but I have the article name, I have the newspaper name. Okay, where can I find this article? In this newspaper. And publication information, well, that would be the day. When was this published? What day did it come out on? Okay, and what page was it on? All right, and what medium? Newspaper. All right, so this looks very difficult, but it's actually pretty easy to navigate. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay. Any information that is not available can be omitted within reason. You want to look for it. If it's not available, then you can omit it. If you don't know it, don't omit it. Find it. Okay? So for instance, last name first. If I'm reading an internet article and I don't know who the author is, I need to look for the author before I just say, I don't know. Okay? Look for who the author is. Okay? And don't forget that there can be corporate authors, meaning a corporation can author or write an article. So, for instance, Wikipedia can be cited as Wikipedia. All right. I wouldn't cite Wikipedia. Okay, I'll tell you that right now. And you guys have heard this from other teachers, I'm sure. Don't cite Wikipedia. Cite the sources that Wikipedia cites. But Coca-Cola can write a history of their own company. Okay, or whatever. Your stakeholder can have this sort of stuff, or your client can have this sort of stuff. That's a corporate or a collective author. That's fine too. But sorry about that digression. If you can find this information, you need to put it in there. If it's able to be found, it needs to be in there. Because remember, you're trying to make it easy for someone to find this source. If you don't have that information and you make it hard for someone to find that source, then it makes your writing less credible. So don't do that. Okay? So any information that's not available can be omitted. So if I'm citing a book but not the article, or a book and not the chapter, then that's fine. Then all I'm going to do is put the book down. I'm going to skip over this. All right? The type of source determines a lot of what will and won't be required. Okay, so what kind of publication information will and won't be required. And then you don't have the handbook. I'm sorry, this is a little bit older, but of a slideshow. You don't have the handbook, but you do have access to Purdue OWL. Okay, so you should all know that, but Purdue Online Writing Lab, and they have the handbook on there for you to look through. All right, so here are some examples, and I'm going to go through these quickly, so take a look at this on the textbook if you need to. You can see there's a hanging indent, all right, but these are longer texts. So you have books like Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, all right? Who wrote that? Rowling, that's her last name, J.K. Where was it printed? New York. Who printed it? This is publication information. Levine Scholastic, 2000. And what kind of medium was it? It was print, meaning it was a physical copy, okay? If I go down here, William Shakespeare's Romeo plus Juliet. This is a movie from the 90s, 1997. If you haven't seen it, you should probably see it. It's pretty good. There is no author. Why? Because a movie has many different people deciding how it looks at the end. You have your editor, you have your director, you have your actor. These are all people that are involved in deciding how this is made. And so together, they are a corporate author, but their corporate author is the title of the movie. So you have William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. That's the title of the movie. I'm going to skip over the author. Why? Not because I don't know it, but because it's not accessible. Like there's no author for this movie. There's no author for most movies. All right. You could say sometimes there's an author, but don't worry about that. So what do? Well, then I put the publication information because there's been a ton of Romeo and Juliet movies. Okay, so which one am I talking about? I'm talking about the one directed, D-I-R, directed by Baz Luhrmann and performed by the two leads, Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes. That's all I needed, right? So who's on the main poster? Who's on the movie poster? The main actors and the director, okay? And then more publication information. Well, who produced it? 20th Century Fox. When? 1997. And what was the medium? Film, okay? All right. I hope this makes sense, but you can look into this more if you need more help, all right? Occasionally, you're going to have to put more information, like so, for instance, here, 6th edition, okay? A research guide for undergraduate students, 6th edition. Well, because it's the 6th time, this is publication information, but it comes before the year, or because not the year. It comes before the place and the publisher and the year. Okay, so it still follows this format, but it's a little bit different depending on what you're doing. Okay, this is just to help you out. So you have shorter things. Okay, rethinking the print object, Gunta, and the book of everything. Okay, where was that? That was PMLA. That's a journal. Okay, so the publication. So if I'm looking at this in terms of the format, this would be the book title. Okay, kind of like New York Times is the book title. When was it published? What was the publication information? Well, it's volume 121.1. Okay, and when 2006. And then you can see, because this is shorter, I need to put page numbers. If it's the whole thing, then you don't need to put page numbers. But if it's a part within a whole, then I need to put that. All right. So for instance, here, Detroit Arcadia, the Engaged Citizen, 4th edition. And I will say, this should be italicized. This is my mistake. All right. The Engaged Citizen should be italics because it's a longer piece of work. It's a book. All right. But I'm citing the article, Detroit Arcadia. Okay. And then you can see down here, it doesn't have the colon, but I do have publication information, and then 89 to 99, that's page numbers, and then medium. The one thing before I move on, you see these punctuation marks. They are there for a purpose, okay? It's to give the reader one chunk of information at a time. Just like a sentence is marked by a period, it's one idea, one idea, one idea. So here, this is one idea of the article name. This is one idea of the book name, publication information, and page numbers. That's one idea sometimes, and it's multiple ideas other times. Why? And you can use your own discretion. But if I look at this, this is one idea. Why? Because it's a journal, and where in the journal? This is a book, so I need to put the book information first, and then I can put the page numbers. All right, so this is all has to do with finding the book. This is all together. All right. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. All right. You also have electronic media, and I already mentioned some of this. One thing that's changed, and you can go ahead and do this even if you want to use this, is that now in MLA you do not need to use date of last access. All right, you used to have to do that because websites would change, and so you want to put the date you last saw it that way, so that in case they changed it, you can explain away why that happened. But you don't have to do that anymore in the new MLA, so don't worry about it if you don't want to. You also do not need to put in the web address because everybody knows how to use Google or whatever, so they can find it if need be. Right? You do want to treat digital pages as print pages, meaning if I go page 1, page 2, page 3 in an article, then you want to put that down as page 1, page 2, page 3. Okay? And then this is an important part. If I have a larger website, I'm going to treat that like a longer work. And if I have an article on a website, then I'm going to treat that as a shorter work on that larger work, similar to this. Okay. So you can see here are some electronic sources. Elite team rescues troops behind enemy lines. Okay, that's this article. Where's the larger website? CNN.com. Okay. And then who published it? Cable News Network on this date. What's the medium? That's web. Okay, it's a web medium. Okay, and then this would be the date of last access, but you don't have to worry about that. All right. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Images. All right, you can go through this on your own. And then you have other things like interviews. If you decide to interview someone, you're more than welcome to. All right, or a speech. Right. Television, digital files. So if I'm using a PDF, then you can do that. Okay, and PDF is basically everything else is the same, but I'm going to put this as the medium, MP3 or PDF or doc or whatever. So that's the works cited page, and I hope that makes sense. If not, again, go to Purdue OWL or send me an email. You also have in-text citation. The point of in-text citation is to direct the reader's attention back to the works cited. Okay? So when you want to use these is when you are changing points of view. So if I'm talking from my own perspective as the author, my ideas, all right, then you don't want your ideas mixed with those of the sources you're citing, especially if you don't agree with the source. So one way to do this is to always put an in-text citation. And this goes for Chicago style and APA style. You always put a citation when you switch from one perspective to the other, as long as from a cited perspective to another. And so you can sometimes write from one source to another source. That's fine, but you still want to put that in-text citation in there. And with MLA, that comes at the end of a phrase, okay? Usually the end of a sentence, but if you have a compound sentence, then at the end of the first part of the compound sentence, okay? So you put them where you are moving away from your source's point of view, so from one perspective to another, okay? And you're trying to show the writer where to or the reader rather, where to find this information in the works cited page, okay? So they can find the source later on. All right. In MLA, in-text citations are called parenthetical citations because you put them in parentheses. Okay. An in-text citation always comes with the author name and the page number. Okay. If I don't know the author's name, then you can use the first few words of the title. Okay. So for instance, with Romeo and Juliet, I might put Romeo plus Juliet or William Shakespeare's Romeo as a way to reference where they can find this information in the works cited entry. It's not so that they can just look wherever and find it just by reading your paper, but so they can look at the works cited, find the rest of the citation, and go find the text if they choose. Okay? And then you also put the page number because you want to show where that idea came from in that text, and that's why you put the page number. If you're using a video clip, then you can put the timestamp if you choose. If you're using a website, you put the article name and all that stuff. Okay. And this goes for direct quotation, paraphrase, summary, all that stuff. It's not just about your when you directly quote. Okay. You can read into this a little bit more. One other thing I'll say is that with parenthetical citations, they always come before the period. All right, always before the period, because you're trying to show where that idea came from. That's in that previous sentence. Okay, that's in that sentence, not in the next sentence, but in that sentence. And so the period marks the end of the sentence. So you want to make sure your parenthetical citation goes before the period. All right. So here's an example. Okay, human beings have been described by Kenneth Burke as symbol-using animals, and you can see it's put in that sentence. All right. Now here we have two different things. Okay, we have Burke 3 and number 3. Okay, when you have, sometimes you'll, if you're writing in a very fluid way, then you'll mention the author or you'll mention the text if you don't have an author in a sentence that you're citing it in, like in example number 1, Kenneth Burke as symbol using animals. Then if that's the case, you don't have to repeat it. You can just put the page number. Here, we don't have Burke's name, so I need to put Burke and 3. Because here, I've directed the reader to the works cited page. They know to look for Burke. Here, if I don't put this in, then this doesn't make sense. Like, there's no place for someone to reference to find more on what this guy means by symbol using animals. All right. I'm going to skip over this, but you can look at this, the special cases. All right. If you have more than one work by the same author, then you usually put author plus title. Okay, that sort of thing. So this is my works cited, just as a final thing. All right, you have the things that I've cited in the course of this paper. Take a look at this. Take a look at the Purdue OWL. They'll give you some more advice, and I hope that this helps. When you're writing your paper, you need a citation for anything that you bring up, because otherwise it's plagiarism. And plagiarism is something that we take very seriously at UK. And so if you look at your syllabus, you'll see that anything that is plagiarism has a chance of getting at least a 0 on the paper, if not for the whole course. So if you buy an essay, then that'll get you a 0 on the whole course. If you consistently plagiarize, then that'll get you a 0 on the whole course. Otherwise, I tend to lean towards 0 on the assignment only, or I tend to try to work with you if it's what we call failure to master, meaning you made a mistake. If you made a mistake, okay. But if it's consistently making a mistake because you didn't go through, then we'll have to talk. So make sure that you're citing your sources. Make sure that you're using something that you're familiar with. If you're not familiar with Chicago or you're not familiar with APA, don't worry about it. Use MLA. And if you aren't familiar with MLA or any of the others, then don't worry about it. Go to Purdue Owl or come talk to me. And I'm happy to help you out. Okay? I hope this has been informative. I hope it hasn't been too boring. I know the MLA lecture can always be kind of a drag, especially if you've taken Word 110 and gotten this lecture before already. So have a good day and take care. Let me know if you have any questions.